You're watching Asia Pacific Hearthstone Grandmasters, our final match of the day, sadly, before we send you over to Europe with Raven and Sottle, where there'll be plenty more great action. A bit of a different metagame than what we have here in Asia Pacific, especially in today's meta, where it feels like the more controlling players are doing better. Flurry with his Tempo Mage and Weapon Rogue definitely struggled in both of his series today, falling unfortunately 0-2, whereas TIZS it has obviously the Mage, which has been doing pretty poorly for him. I think he's 0-3 so far today. Whereas Shaxy on his side of the board has the aggro Demon Hunter. So I wonder if it's going to be a question of whose aggro deck is performing worse for these players, or if maybe there's an alternate weak spot for these players in their strategy.
I want to tag on a disclaimer too. When we say the controlling decks, it's the people that have had Soul Demon Hunter that have performed super well. Starting off the day with a 3-0 for Tom60229, but that's not to say his lineup as a whole is running many control decks. Everybody's running Bomb Warrior, which is probably the most heavy on a control package of any deck in the meta, because we're seeing time and time again that the Soul Demon Hunter, more so than its removal, relies on its face damage. And Tom, of course, had that zoo, and he was the first one to sail through to the semifinals. However, I do agree that Mage has been struggling quite a bit, Rogue as well. We are entering rematch territory where if anybody was tuned in at the beginning of the day, they'll remember that Shaxy only by the skin of his teeth won this matchup.
Right, it's been a bit of a crazy day for Shaxy and TIZS, it's got to be said, in terms of the outcomes that they maybe weren't in control of. But I think it's a great point you bring up about Mage, because I feel like this is maybe a case of APAC often playing catch-up to Europe in metagame, the decks that they're piloting. Obviously, Europe was at 100% Tempo Mage last week, after which it has dropped quite significantly. And I think it's arguable that the players in APAC maybe put too much stock in Tempo Mage after that, because as I've said time and again, while I love the deck, I do not personally feel like it's especially well equipped to the current metagame.
Yeah, I'm just giving a quick once-over to the mages in APAC, at least how they've been performing in the Swiss rounds. A couple of these have gone 5-7, and a couple have gone all the way up to 9-5.
Okay.
But it seems like across the board, it would still veer slightly negative for Mage if my estimation skills are correct. But for TIZS in particular, he didn't get a single win with this Mage in the Swiss portion, and on stream it feels like he's done pretty poorly with it still. So it could be this particular list also is a bit old-fashioned, even though I do say I like the Jandis in there.
Yeah, I think TIZS may literally be 0-7 now with this Tempo Mage today. I don't know if it's the playstyle he's going for, the list, which, you know, I did say at the start, I'm not the biggest fan of this version of the deck that runs more minions at the expense of cheap spells and arcane intellect in particular. But it does definitely feel like, finally, Gia, especially against Druid, this is the kind of hand you're looking for. Shenvala, Sorcerer's Apprentice, plenty of card draw, just needs the cheap spells, and he is going to be popping off.
Absolutely. Shenvala always tempting to get down early against Druid, because at 5 health, it just barely survives against Bog Beam Hero Power and that type of thing. But because TIZS didn't have the immediate payoff, I don't mind him going for card draws there. This is still very scary, because Shaxy has just hit an amazing ramp hand, though, and can have the Guardian Animals coming down. But TIZS' response is looking pretty great.
This is insane. This is like the nuts from both players going up against each other. These Guardian Animals. TIZS doesn't love to see that, because he wants to see as much health on the board as possible. He just wants to be able to have as much stuff to shoot with these Ray of Frosts and the missiles and the Brain Freeze as well. But he can still start to do some very powerful plays, whether it's this turn or next turn.
Yeah, popping off with the Shenvala definitely looks pretty good on the next turn, but he does have to consider, like you said, because there's only 6 health on the board, can he get a full 2 cycles off of the Shenvala? Can he play 6 spells? Each of the Ray of Frosts can only go off once before they start damaging a minion.
Right.
It's possible, though, unless the arcane missiles go very, very wrong. And he does have to go pretty much ASAP. Because Shaxy is running the Malagos version. it's not all reliant on minions,
Yeah.
and so TIZS can't just wait and delay the board. Oh my god,
Evocation as well. Oh my god. Okay, that's bad. That's just a hand space filled up. But whatever, we carry on. It's still ridiculously powerful on this turn. He can cast all 4 Ray of Frost without killing a single minion. That's huge.
Name of the game is just getting as many 5/5s on board as possible. That's why he's cashing in the Rays of Frost.
Oh my god. Okay, sure, yeah, this is even better.
Arcane Missiles can get sense. Evocation, if it generates a single 1-cost spell, will get another 5/5 on the board, and that Arcane Breath is it.
Well, it already gets it just by virtue of having the Evocation being played. That is a terrible outcome, I will say, off of the Evocation, all things considered. Way too expensive. But the important factor is 3 5/5s on the board, Mana Giant, Steward of Scrolls, all ready to come down next turn. It has to be an insane answer just to stay alive from Shaxy.
And we did see something very insane with the Malagos pulled at the very last second, but at this moment, in this game, not really seeing it for Shaxy. Is there anything you can do with the Omu? It can almost essentially just a free 5/4 at the minute. It's not really giving him ways to deal with the 5/5s. You could see the Breath of Dreams happen first. I can't even see a Guardian Animals out because he's drawn Beasts.
Yeah, I mean, just in case any of you are wondering, this is the point at which you screenshot this screen right now, tweet it at Crane with only the description, only the caption, Flat Earther.
Wait,
that's all you say.
Malagos Moonfire, Lake Thrasher can happen. I mean, he just has to remove a 5/5, right? Otherwise, he's at 1 HP.
He's just taken the risk.
Okay.
Evocation off the top of the deck. Surely there's some damage here. 1 missile?
Yeah, 1 missile going face is lethal.
Oh!
Okay. Oh, man.
And finally, at the end of all of that, after going, how bad is it? 0-7, he finally manages to get a win on the board with his mage. Shenbala absolutely popping off against pretty much the ideal Druid hand, getting Overgrowth into Guardian Animals, still not coming close.
That was insane indeed. And while that was pretty much a little draw for TIZS there, I wonder if there's ever a world where Shaxy's supposed to keep one of his guys stealthed in case there's a big pop-off turn. It's probably very fringe. I doubt that Shaxy really could have done anything there. Sometimes Mage just gets that type of hand, but Shaxy was very close to popping off himself with a very cheap Malagos. Had he survived one more turn, we could have seen things go the other way. Just the type of explosive matchups you want to see in this matchup.
Actually, the more I think about it, the more I like your point, because TIZS is not playing Devolving Missiles, which is the main reason why you have to attack with your Twilight Runners against Mage. So leaving it stealth there, especially as the Violet Spellwing wouldn't necessarily have been able to die, so Arcane Missiles wouldn't have been able to necessarily come down and clear off the board. There, I think, was actually a fair amount of merit to leaving the Twilight Runners stealth, all things considered, even if it's kind of a niche play.
Yeah, kept his hand not so flexible for the following turns because he needed to eventually draw towards a Malagos turn, but it remains, the point remains that Mage does need targets to really go off. You keep pressing this point home, and it really, really rings true, especially for the Shenvala turns. But that one will be in the books. It does mean TIZS gets to queue up his Mage again because this is last hero standing. And Shaxy has numerous ways to counter queue into this.
Yeah, he's still got a few decent matchups. We've seen the power of Priest, I think it's fair to say, quite a few times up against the Mage, but it's a very different Priest that we're seeing here once again from Shaxy. It's not the Highlander variant, and it's not even really comparable to a lot of the other versions of versions of Priest that we're seeing across the field, with double Wandmaker, double Cobalt Spellkin. He is definitely relying on the one-cost spell synergy, which could, to be fair, be pretty powerful at keeping the board clear.
For an opening curve, Shaxy's hit pretty much all of the cheap minions that he wants. Getting the Sethic or the Wand Maker down preemptively already presents something that Mage doesn't want to be spending spells this early to deal with.
I really like getting on the board as soon as possible against Mage. You know, again, I talk about the value of not putting minions on the board because you don't want to give targets to your opponent. When it's turn 1 and you're coining out a 2-drop, it just means your opponent can't stick the spell damage minions. It's harder for them to activate the cram session afterwards. And if you can stick an Apotheosis on it as well, that's when things start to get really quite scary for the Mage.
Yeah, and it's huge also that Shaxy was the one who started on coin, which means that Firebrand coin shenanigans won't happen. It's a full turn later to have to worry about your minions dying to that.
It's a big push onto the board.
Yeah. However, Firebrand plus Arcane Missiles could be a very, very big swing for TIZS here, as long as he hits one missile on this guy. Oh! Oh! That was a little scary there, Derek.
Giving us a plot twist ending at the end there. I love it. But the rest of TIZZ's hand, in its own right, is looking very powerful. Primordial studies to find, I guess, hopefully the Prime would be the best way to keep card draw rolling and also get an extra win condition in his deck.
I mean, for TIZZ, he has every piece of the puzzle he wants except Mana Cyclone with the Apprentice already in hand and Evocation. But we can see this Illucia in Shaxy's hand. We've had some crazy Illucias throughout the day, lots of tough spots, and no objectively easy to figure out timings for when to play it. So for TIZZ here, he, I think, is not gonna have Illucia on his mind as the first thing he wants to play. I tend to think that when the Priest has it, a lot of the time you can't do very much to play around it without ruining your own game plan.
Yeah.
It's more so if Shaxy has a good read on what he can steal from TIZZ.
I think he's very, very likely to just go with the card draw option on this turn. Lab Partner as well, perfect to get the maximum draw. But the problem is, if Illucia does come down, if Shaxy can get the read on TIZZ's hand here, oh, it's just so perfect.
And it is looking like a pretty good turn to do so, at least in terms of what Shaxy would give TIZZ on the backswing, which is 2 Soul Mirrors that are not playable. The Mage Scribe would go back up in cost for TIZZ because the Primordial Studies was played by Shaxy. And so... the problem is, Shaxy would only have 2 mana to play with there, so he has to have a very strong read on Apprentice and cheap spells in order to go for that. And I think we've seen people play a lot safer with Illucia than that. So we could just see Apotheosis Sethic, potentially.
Power in trinkets!
Not bad, you know, it's a powerful turn and it's keeping the board somewhat in control. And to be fair, TIZZ, he kind of wants to wait another turn here, right, before you pop off, because Evocation and Cyclone don't go together very well because you fill up your hand, so you don't have room for the created spells.
Yeah, I mean, you would have to have very good knowledge of the average cost of Evocation spells to optimize this turn, which admittedly I don't have that knowledge. And the alternative for waiting is not so bad. He could a Mana Giant here, make them have the removal.
It's true. The turn before Soul Mirror, it's the turn before Galakron. It's not a terrible time to get down the Giant at all.
He also just wants to free up space in case, I mean, next turn is very likely to be Evocation, so you would want to have as few other cards in hand as possible. And maybe with that in mind, he's just preloading the Shanvala here.
I can get on board with this. I can definitely get on board with this play. It's not necessarily the easiest card to deal with for Priest, and if they don't have the answer, that is when you start giga popping. Like, your hand just goes crazy.
Priest does run double Cabal Acolyte. I feel like this card, alongside the Lab Partner, sure, it's not the easiest to deal with. Shaxy, he has to know something's up with the hand, right? Your opponent is unlikely to just go Shanvala pass unless they're planning something for the next turn. And that's me trying to justify Alucia again, but it's so hard to justify playing it when you and I know full well what's in the other hand. And Shaxy, of course, has limited ways to get knowledge of that.
And this undeniably is the turn. The only argument you can make is whether or not he should throw down the Firebrand first to make more room, but in the end, it is not a bad outcome whatsoever. He's really just looking to hit Giant plus Conjurers, right? If he can get the mana down cheap enough on this turn.
So we can go Missiles, Incanters, Flow. I mean, is he even playing a second Apprentice here?
I wouldn't think so.
It's a bit tough. You also kind of want to Cone of Cold the guy, but it's too expensive to justify, I think.
I mean...
So... you can go for the Cyclone and try to get something cheaper off of that, but there's very little space to do so.
I don't know if I like the Arcane Intellect there. Oh.
Just because it misses one more Shanvala charge?
Well, not so much that, it's just that the Mana Cyclone doesn't get a strong activation now. You know, the Arcane Intellect would have been at the end of the in the hand at the end of the turn anyway, and it doesn't get Mana Giant down either. It's very close.
Yeah, it was very, very difficult to optimize that. I don't think there's a way to get everything done guaranteed, which is both the Cyclone and the Mana Giant, and get a Shanvala activation. All things considered, TIZS still ends up with the good follow-up turn of Mana Giant Conjurer's Calling, but you're right, the Cyclone could get a little bit stuck on the follow-up. Soul Mirror for Shaxy will pick him up. A Totem Goliath, that is the right guy this time, I recognize it.
Very well recognized. Clearing up the Apprentice is obviously a big deal, but this is still a lot of damage left on the board. Any kind of face damage that he can generate on this turn, of which he will be able to generate quite a lot of spells, would be huge.
And the Firebrand gets a lot of work done on this board with 1 health minions.
Sure.
Okay, starting off with card draw. Also wants to get Shanvala value while he can. Snap pick the Combustion, but not gonna lie, I was looking at Frostbolt because it can go face.
Same. Yes.
But it turns out that there would not have been that much mana to work with if he goes for Firebrand, so he's just taking Combustion for a guaranteed way to deal with the Totem Goliath.
You can get the Cyclone down. You can trade in minions to get the Giant down.
Nothing dies.
You can kill something off now. So that will summon a 5/5, but it won't because there won't be board space at the time of casting the spell. Oh, it gets so complicated.
Okay. I was definitely looking at him killing off his own minions as well, but this still leaves a lot of threats on board, and he maintains the Giant Conjurer's Calling for the next turn. I think TIZS played this just about as well as he could have, with the amount of different iterations that could have happened there. Pretty impressive.
Yeah, it's close. The one thing to bear in mind is this is not especially well positioned against a Soul Mirror, because you kind of want to have the Apprentice on the far right-hand side. But that is very, very nitpicky, and it's the kind of thing that, you know, obviously it's before you start your turn and you just want to start going. It's really difficult to think of those things.
Shaxy does have a pretty good way of dealing with these. Pyromancer, either Wave or Embalming, or the Death, sure. I don't think he'll rest about dealing with totems either. So the Embalming Pyro means you get your Pyro back immediately.
Right.
And then he can go Wave of Apathy if he feels it's worth it to get rid of Shanvala that way. Okay, just Forbidden Words, and then you leave up a couple totems. Sure.
And annoyingly enough here for TIZS, he hadn't generated any burst damage. But Solarian Prime off the top could be the extra burst damage he needs on the following turn when it comes down to it.
It's a pretty good as well from the Conjure's Calling.
Oh, yeah.
I would like to see that Violet Spellwing come down, give himself the most damage for next turn. But he's certainly not expecting another Soul Mirror.
And if you wanted a perfect example of the nerf to Elucia actually making a difference, try playing this Solarium Prime now, Shaxy. Good luck with that.
All things considered, this is still going to end up pretty clean for Shaxy. Both of the immediate threats removed. Picks up a cheap spell. Another Arcane Missiles, which could be relevant because he has Pyro again.
Mm-hmm.
Is it prime time?
Having these minions on the other side of the board is really annoying because if you get Pyroblast, Fireball, all of that good stuff, it can soak up a lot of damage. But it is a 7/7 that could just Pyroblast your opponent.
Oh, one you really don't want to see, but that is insane!
Oh no, wait! But it doesn't get the Prime!
No space! You're right! Ah! And there's the Pyro you were talking about! I was going to talk about how if you're hoping to get Pyro in the first place, then that's a high roller mentality. I think it's more likely you end up with things that clear minions, so you're fine if there are minions on board.
Yep.
But this now was... I mean, you generally want Solarium Prime to deal cleanup duty there, at least from the position TIZS was in. Kind of made a bigger mess, but he's at least generated these two 5/4s, which are on the far right of the board, and the Homunculus takes up one space for Soul Mirror. Okay, but no other minions, so Soul Mirror can get there.
That was also the perfect Arcane Missile, so well done there, TIZS. That was very unlikely.
Yeah, and there is no remaining Soul Mirror for Shaxy.
Yeah, so Prime gone. Elucia's not going to be getting that anymore, obviously.
Yep, if Shaxy's deck tracker is working properly, then he should know there's no Prime in hand for TIZS. But he still has to look for solutions from TIZ's hand, I think, whether it be with the Lazul or the Elucia.
He doesn't have to, right? He can get away with Galakron Wave of Apathy or develop his minions Wave of Apathy.
Okay.
Weirdly enough,
scary
actually,
to leave that much spell damage on board.
it just buffs half the board as well with the 2 totems.
A simple
Yeah, you still can just 6 on board, huh?
Okay, another Wave of Apathy. Things are happening here. You know, that's stall for a couple of extra turns, if nothing else.
Yeah, it's pseudo board locking TIZS also, with only one other space remaining.
Yeah, pseudo being the operative word there, given that he's still taking 6 damage every single turn.
These are not good outcomes to discover. Is it gonna be card draw?
I'm
But
looking
there's
at
not much space to work with.
Blizzy and Conjurer's Calling looks fairly clean, right? Get a couple of 7-drops.
I
Sure.
wonder.
Gets Blizzard out of your hand as well, which is pretty good in case you're afraid of Elucia.
Yeah, that's a very good point. There's still the Flame Strike in there, but it's crucial to fit in the Conjurer's Calling as well and threaten lethal for the next turn.
Yeah.
Although technically you're still threatening lethal if you don't expect a second wave of apathy, because
Right.
the Priestesses of Elune go back up to 5 attack also.
And yeah, if he is going for Conjurer's Calling here on the 7-drop, which isn't necessarily what he'll do, because of Stormwind Champion, this was the wrong order. But I'll reserve my judgment for when we actually see the play, of course.
If there was a way to just discard the totems, TIZS would absolutely love to do that.
Right, yeah. Okay.
Ideally, that turn would have been draw with the cram session, but there just wasn't enough space to work with.
Well, it is, again, representing lethal, needing to find some way to stay alive from Shaxy, which Wave of Apathy technically does do for yet another turn. But how is he digging himself out of here? He doesn't have Zephyrus in the deck. He's playing the non-Highlander variant. Murazond, if TIZS like really messes up and gives him some insane outcome, can possibly get there, but I'm just not seeing consistent enough board clears here.
Neither am I. There's no way this can get up to 7 charges to deal with Solarian.
I mean, I think he might be relying on missiles to get there in like the ideal scenario, or something from Alusha, but I'm definitely not seeing it.
Yeah. He could heal the Pyro, wave, and then go Draconic, and then missiles. That last spell won't get the Pyro activation. Ah, man. Okay, this is a clear. Just heal and Forbidden Words.
Right. Okay. I mean, that was impressive. I didn't really see that line of getting the Pyro into perfect arcane missiles as well. And that really does change the texture of the game all of a sudden.
That's a pretty big draw for TIZS. The Ras is even more pressure. Easy way to deal with the Homunculus.
Whoa. Wow. I mean, you've got to be looking at Giant Conjurer's Calling here, right?
Oh, yeah.
Whoa! Potion of Illusion! What do you just take the missiles? That's more face damage here.
I'm looking at the missiles for sure.
Oh, he's
Wow,
looking at the
he
counter spell.
Counters. After seeing 2 Soul Mirrors?
Yeah. I was looking at the other two much more heavily, I gotta say.
Well, Shaxy either believes in his Galakrond or in his Ilusha. Madness steals Ras.
So you could steal Raz, and then he's 1 mana off from going Ilusha Conjurer's Calling in order to turn it into 2 5-drops. I mean, even then, I think that's too low value.
Yeah. It's just not getting anything done.
Hoping to snipe with Gala.
Looks like his best odds.
I am beyond imagination. Succumb to madness.
Yikes.
Miss on the Raz, but the 20 health is still quite a lot for TIZS to overcome at the end.
Alright, we're going in now. TIZS, Giant Conjurer's Calling. He could even throw down a Primordial Studies if he wanted to as well. And he gets an insane outcome. Coil Fang Warlord.
Wait, this
It's
Tricaster
disgusting.
too was just a ton of spell damage for Ras if you wanted it.
That's true.
But this was going to be a Cyclone turn in the end. Fireball generated. +2 spell damage in hand. And Shaxy... Alright. His only
Counterspell.
option is Ilusha now, right?
Right, counterspell in play. Ilusha Flame Strike doesn't even come close.
I mean, Shaxy just has to hope that his generated a Nova and something cheap from that last mana Cyclone. Not there, though.
I mean, I think the real answer there was to go Wave of Apathy and just try and hit that off of the Cobalt Spellkins to get a win. But
Alright.
in the end, Shaxy throws it down 2-0, despite going without a single win through the Swiss portion and in his first 3 games of today. TIZS picks up 2 wins in a row with the Mage. What is changing here, Gia, to start actually picking up the wins?
Honestly, it seemed pretty innocuous. I can't pick out any specific moment that stood out to me. I think TIZS has been playing badly towards the end of the day,
Right.
but the curves have been a lot smoother, I suppose, and the turns that he does get down the Big Apprentice, the Mana Cyclone was there to follow up. The Giants and Conjurer's Calling played a huge role in this matchup as well.
It's just, I mean, for me, against Priest in particular, the real thing that Mage needs to do is it doesn't really matter what it's doing, it just needs to keep doing it. As long as you're putting something onto the board, playing spells, developing minions, getting Conjurers down, cheapening your Giant, no matter what it is, eventually the Priest will run out of stuff, as we saw there from Shaxy, which I think kind of highlights why I think most players would steer away from Shaxy's specific build of the deck, because it has a lot of removal in the version of the deck, but it doesn't really have the oomph to lock down the board and go for a win, which a lot of the other Priest decks do have.
Yeah, I have to say the Highlander priests have been looking a whole lot stronger, at least in the consistency of their value, primarily because of Zephyrus, Ray's dead. I'm looking at all the other priests that we had, and I think that Shaxy's definitely been performing the worst with that.
Yeah, it hasn't been looking amazing for him, but with the mage only needing to get one last win for TIZS, it's looking great for him, obviously, with the Demon Hunter being the last remaining deck for Shaxy, and what a perfect way for us to go out here, because this, while we talk about his priest deck being a bit weird, his Demon Hunter deck is really weird compared to a lot of the other versions. Double Wandmaker, double Cobalt Spellkin, aggro Demon Hunter. This is not a list that you're going to be seeing around on ladder very much, let me tell you.
Right. The weird list that I thought I already saw on Twitter was what I tweeted out with the double Battle Fiends in there, but Shaxy just went one step further in terms of hybridizing the tempo version with the soul version. And now he's ended up on running 8 1-drops in the list and has that top end of the Lapidary. I still think that there's some potential for this just being a spiritual successor to the old Demon Hunter, and now just running Lapidaries instead of Glaive-bound Adepts because they can come down on turn 5 and be active much more consistently. But this might not be the refined list quite yet.
I can definitely see that being a thing. You know, there's a lot of kind of gubbins in the Soul version of Demon Hunter with Magtheridon that's not really very good in a lot of the matchups, a lot of the removal spells, whereas you could just go even more stripped down, even more damage straight to the face if you wanted to take that route.
And he is hitting the curve that Demon Hunters have been known for, of just 1-2 plus deal with your minions, maintain my minions. However, TIZS has drawn pretty well so far. Gonna hold off on the pop-off for one turn, and I think it's wise to get the Arcane Missiles in hand, well, the second one from the Violet Spellwing in hand, because going off on that turn, it wasn't likely to deal with the Battle Fiend.
Absolutely agree. I think it's a great recognition from TIZS that while this is an aggro matchup that he's facing down and he does need to try and stop the damage very soon, he's also got to actually win the game. If he just goes for a Sorcerer's Apprentice Mana Cyclone and only generates 2 spells, that's not game win in its own right. He needs to pop off, which means Ray of Frost, getting a Magic Trick as well. Any kind of cheap effect that can continuously generate him spells is the way he wins.
And I've seen Cult Neophyte be very, very annoying for Mage turn after turn. Mana Burn filling a very similar role here. It's delaying TIZS pop-off turn by 1 more. Not that Shaxy knows that TIZS is particularly saving up for that, but it's just Shaxy saying, I want my 2 minions to connect base and give myself best possible chance of doing so, because after he's played these small guys, the deck starts to become more concentrated in terms of burst damage, lapidaries in their slicers.
I love small guys. I'm totally addicted to playing it. But Magic Trick off the top there is absolutely insane here for TIZS. No matter what spell he's going for here, it's disgusting. Arcane Explosion is huge, squishies up the board, and makes it that much easier for him to clear things off. Mirror Image is insane, just to get yet more taunt in the way.
It really is. The fact that he took Arcane Explosion makes me think he did want to go for another Apprentice here. So we're going to see him go all the way off here. Mana Cyclone. There's a chance that he gets the Mana Giant down this turn as well. And the coin counts towards Mana Giant's activations.
Oh yes, it is insane.
He gets 3 cards that cost 2 or less.
Oh, it's close.
But you'll settle. This Frostbolt, freezing Demon Hunter faces, remains good.
Yeah, it kind of just means that he has to trade the minion in instead of being able to attack face, which is a pretty big deal.
Absolutely. Oh, and the Satyr Overseer is locked in.
Shaxy could play it.
Demon Companion, not very useful here whatsoever.
Does mean that both of the apprentices can be dealt with, quote-unquote, because the discount effect has been silenced away, but now is where things go into overdrive for TIZS. He can clear up most of the board. Giant Conjurers, get out of my game.
Absolutely. We are just going to see a 3-0 sweep with Mage, the deck that we've been touting as the weak spot in this lineup. But it does have these types of games every so often. Wrong. Guy that can't go face, but it's fine because Shaxy essentially cannot stick a minion for the rest of the game because of that.
Yep, Supreme Abyssal can be the sweeper, just getting all the minions out the way, whilst Grom punches Shaxy directly in the face every turn.
It's the big bad and his henchmen.
I grow impatient.
I guess so.
I yield.
Supreme Abyssal sounds like a boss name there, for sure. Sounds like a final boss name.
And final boss is exactly what Shaxy has found here, as TIZS perfectly sandwiches our day, Gia. We had the start of a 3-0 sweep from Tom, the end of a 3-0 sweep by TIZS, and a lot of juicy meat in the middle. I think we can agree with all of the nonsense that occurred with Shaxy taking ridiculous wins, weird plays from Flurry along the way. But all in all, what a day over in APAC Hearthstone GM. It's been a lot of fun. And I think TIZS, as our second newcomer that we've seen going through to the semi-finals alongside Bank Yugi last week, is clearly showing that the New Guard have a lot of skill to display. They've got to prove themselves, but so far they're doing so.
I've been extremely impressed by TIZS. He's just maintained such a level head no matter what situation he's in, no matter what deck he's piloting. And despite having such a bad role with the Mage in his Swiss portion, he definitely didn't look like he lacked experience on it playing in this very series. I will say, though, that based on how the matches played out today, I can't pinpoint if there is a strategy going into this last Hero Standing week that is superior to the rest. We've just seen Druid perform well. We've seen Demon Hunter take sweeps, and now we've seen the Mage take a sweep. It does very much just feel like best decks, despite this being a different in terms of queue order philosophy compared to Conquest.
Yeah, I mean, we've got to remember as well that this is the top 8 we're seeing. There's a whole half of the field who didn't even get to this point, so there probably is a strategy that just wasn't working for most of the players. And given that we haven't seen that much tempo Mage up at the top 8, I'd have to imagine most of them are rolling around the bottom, where I think most of the tempo Mage players will be. But talking of the top 8, we can see a recap of the matches that were played out today and who we will be seeing on Sunday, of course, for our semi-finals and finals. Tom, former world champion, showing us exactly why that was the case. Sailing through with a very impressively played day of Hearthstone. I've got to say, apart from like one blip with Lucia that I was a little unsure of, I think he was just playing lights out throughout the day.
Actually impressed with how he handled that Zoo game versus Shaxy's aggressive Demon Hunter that Tom didn't even have the Dark Glare pop-off turn, which we were saying is the only way you win with the deck pretty much. Instead, he relied on the Expired Merchant, Hand of Gul'dan, and got himself all the way down to 4 HP, but at the very last moment put together a swingy enough board to take the win. I'm so excited to see Tom play on the weekend and put himself in the best position to make it to Division A, which I feel he narrowly missed out on last season.
Yeah, I mean, he showed exactly by dominating Division B how deserving he was to get into Division A. But of course, we do have to find out who else is going to be joining these two players in the semi-final on Sunday. So we're going to take a look at Bracket B to see who we have tomorrow. A very different day in terms of the kind of styles of player that we have. Kin, who obviously had a bit of a disastrous run at the end of, or throughout the round robin last season, hardly picking up any wins whatsoever, but off to a good start again in the Swiss, going up against Surrender. I think even though again and again we're seeing Surrender do very well in Grandmasters, Kin is the caliber of player that can put up a real fight.
I'm especially excited to see Surrender's lineup and see how it performs because he's the only player not bringing Warrior in APAC, and we did see all throughout today Warrior was banned across the board. It's definitely seen as the most threatening deck. So what is Surrender doing different? We'll find out tomorrow. But for Kin also, there's a Galakron Warlock in that lineup, which we haven't seen at all today either.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing Tyler play tomorrow, and I'm kind of looking forward to seeing him lose, because we've been playing against each other a bunch on ladder, and he's been beating me a little bit too much. I think he needs to be put in his place, quite frankly, by a Possessi, who has been performing, obviously, very well, repping the Japanese region the last couple of weeks, while Glory and Alutemu have been struggling to get into the top 8s. But that does mean that for APAC, at least, we're pretty much done for the day. All of our matches played out. So unless, Gia, you have anything to add for our final comments, we're going to send everyone over to Europe.
Well, I just want to thank everybody for tuning in, and also stay tuned for next week where we move on to another format, Specialist Online.
Yeah, that's right. So Gia and I will be back with APAC at the same time tomorrow, finding out who the other two players joining us in the semi-finals will be. But there's still Europe and Americas to come left today, so make sure you don't go anywhere. A full day of Hearthstone yet to come, and we'll be watching right alongside you. Thanks for watching.